ISO is about spontaneous volunteers, and how do you help emergency planners to think about spontaneous volunteers? So if a disaster was to happen, then would you want to involve spontaneous volunteers or not? So there are pros and there are cons perhaps, and each official needs to think through what are the consequences of involving them or not involving them. So this standard provides guidelines for the things that we need to think about, and assuming that organisations do want to go ahead with spontaneous volunteers and involving them, then what kind of issues do we need to think about and have a process in place? A spontaneous volunteer is an individual who is not affiliated with emergency response organisations, but they are so motivated by what they see on the television or over social media that they desperately want to come and help. And so they come out of their house and are motivated to provide that support to people who have been affected by the disaster.
The standard is a critical one because in a globalised age with mass communication, people turn up at events, often in order to help, sometimes to sightsee, but the ones who come to help may or may not be equipped to help. They don't understand the framework of other emergency services, fire services, rescue services, so they can be a risk to themselves as opposed to the help they propose. This guidance will allow an emergency manager or crisis coordinator at an event to sit down and say, here's how I manage the people who arrive who aren't already part of a trained, established framework.
In Canada, it's an issue. Spontaneous volunteers is an important issue. We've had a lot of emergencies that go from everything from missing children in the wintertime to wildfires, floods, ice storms. And certainly what we're finding is that communities are looking for some advice on how to create frameworks to involve spontaneous volunteers.
South African people are caring and supportive, and they always reach out to people in need, especially in times of emergency. I believe this standard speaks to this need of managing and organizing volunteers to a more effective and coordinated response to emergencies. The standard will give people a sense of direction in terms of how to deal with spontaneous volunteers, because I think with social media and with people reaching out to other people in need, there's always a need to have things more organized and more planned and more effective. And if you read the standard, you will understand that it's normal to have these spontaneous volunteers coming to a situation, and it will give you direction and empower you to manage the situation better.
The standard is needed because it's representing the latest thinking of how to plan for these spontaneous volunteers. And as we all know, they are a tremendous asset and resource for the emergency managers. Emergency responders. And as you know, this involvement of these spontaneous volunteers, they need to be planned for, and we all need to ensure that we use them in the best possible way.
Spontaneous volunteers are important to us because they give a very valuable extra resource to the emergency responders and the local authorities. Quite often as well, they're people from and within the affected communities, so it's absolutely right and proper that they're part of the response, and they want to be as well.
We have seen through many situations that we have to deal with spontaneous volunteers that often end up and want to do good, but we have not always been able to treat them in the best way, or to even use them in the best way that we could. So therefore I think this is a good opportunity to develop this and to make this better.
By providing this international standard, ISO22319, it helps ensure that resources are used as effectively as possible. And this helps organizations of all types and sizes to operate as efficiently as possible.
From our perspective, focusing on providing guidance, guidelines, knowledge to governments at all scales, but also to community groups, to other associations of people, on how they should prepare and respond in the event of crisis coming is a critical and valuable tool
There's a need to understand the variety of motivations that spontaneous volunteers will engage with, so that if we understand those motivations, then we can seek to address them. And we want to clarify issues of reliability, because liability is obviously one of the main concerns that responders have.